This past weekend, I finally made my way out of Hard and into Grandmaster 1, and along with that, I established the first iteration of what will likely be many iterations of my very first Colossus build, or loadout. I've deemed this one the Heavy Metal Wizard. It's all about the synergy between the Elemental Rage Masterwork Assault Rifle and my Firewall mortar to optimize my damage when it comes to setting things on fire. It's a build all about burning things at really hot temperatures for as long as possible, and in general, using the Colossus as an artillery-style offensive support tool that only really gets in the thick of it when it's absolutely necessary, to pick up health globes, to replenish ammo. Otherwise, we're looking to constantly use the abilities and the synergy happening between these abilities to optimize damage across the board with any of the targets that the game might throw at us. So, with this build and with any of my builds, there's a lot of opportunities for you to plug and play your own personal preferences. Or maybe you just don't have a certain weapon or a certain ability, a certain component. You can always swap things out. Again, when it comes to builds here on the channel, I want them to be more of a groundwork that you can build from. You know, look at them as inspiration. What could I do? What could I use, the sort of ideology of this build? How could I make this work for my own build with my own javelin, whether it's the same javelin or a different javelin? Because I know a lot of you are maybe making your way into a game like this for the very first time. You're not familiar with the idea of making builds to optimize damage or performance in a certain area. So again, you can copy it verbatim if you've got everything you've got, but look for ways to build off of that and make it your own as well. In this particular case, with the Heavy Metal Wizard, you do need Elemental Rage to make this build work exactly the way I'm making it work. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the Elemental Rage is all about. This is a Masterwork Assault Rifle that comes equipped with the Veteran's Fuhrer perk. Hitting elite enemies increases all elemental damage by 5% for 10 seconds, and it stacks up to 20. That means you can increase elemental damage by a total of 100%. This is going to be really useful for maximizing the damage output of our Firewall mortar. But let's go ahead and talk about our secondary weapon before we move any further. We are running Insult and Injury. Now, this is the most plug-and-play personal preference portion of this entire loadout. You can run whatever the hell you want here. I just like Insult and Injury because I like Victor's Bulwark as a perk. I like having it around, but more importantly, I just want to have a secondary that I can equip, dump all of the rounds out of, know that I'm doing some sort of damage to the enemies in front of me, and then go back to Elemental Rage so I can focus on maintaining those stacks and getting the most out of my Firewall mortar. That is the main focus of this build. Everything else is essentially an afterthought, but I do like my afterthoughts to blow things up a lot. So Insult and Injury works well here. Feel free to swap it out for any weapon of your own personal preference. Let's go ahead and talk about Firewall mortar. This is, of course, a primer that functions from an AoE and dot or damage over time perspective. You can lay this thing down, enemies can walk into it, you can dump it on top of them, and they start to burn, at which point, if they don't have a shield equipped, they will be primed for detonation. Now, you do still want to detonate your targets, even though we're going to do a lot more damage with the 20 stack. 100% increase the Firewall mortar damage with Veteran's Fuhrer. You still want to go ahead and detonate because that's where you're going to fully maximize or reach the potential of any primer or any detonator on a damage front. When it comes to Firewall mortar, 20 seconds, 14-second recharge, you really just want to have this thing out on the battlefield all of the time. Groups of targets, single elite targets, VIP targets, big targets, boss targets, just keep dumping Firewall mortar on them. As long as you've got those stacks up to 20 on your Veteran's Fuhrer, you're going to see a huge increase in damage output. If you're on hard especially, this thing just melts on hard. Like big elite scars with shields, no problem. You don't even really have to complete the combo, to be honest. If you're running like power level 350 to like 370, this thing is just going to melt them so hard that completing the combo with a detonator is just kind of overkill, which is exactly what you're looking for when you're near the end of a difficulty. You want to really be destroying everything in your path, because once you jump up to GM1, that's going to help you be far more prepared, and you're also quickly going to realize that you're no longer the godly powerhouse you once were, because enemies have a bit more HP, and you need to find new ways to do a lot more damage. So yeah, this is the big synergy. Firewall mortar, Elemental Rage, keep those two rocking and rolling, and you are going to burn a lot of things and burn them well. When we talk about our heavy assault launcher, we are running a detonator in the form of a long-range detonator with Railgun. Again, this appeals to the positioning that I like to have with this particular javelin, especially on GM1. You can die really quickly on GM1 as somebody who's only sitting at gear score like 400. I think I was 397 or 380 or something like that when I first started playing GM1. So being at a distance helped me survive a lot while also maintaining that damage output so I could actually help my team and be of use, actually contribute to the damage my team was doing. The thing I like about the Railgun, outside of it being a ranged detonator, is that it has armor-piercing rounds. This armor-piercing projectile punches through armor, and it makes this thing an insanely high-damage, single-target assault launcher to equip. It just crushes armored targets. And with the Colossus, it doesn't really matter how we detonate our combos. We're always detonating an explosive combo, so I don't really see the need for an AoE-style assault launcher like the Siege Cannon. However, there's a few downsides to the Railgun. Number one, it's not as forgiving. You have to make sure you actually hit the target you want to hit. You're not going to get damage off of AoE with it. It has a charge-up time, which means you have to take that into regard when looking to detonate combos or when looking to shoot anyone for that matter. And you don't really get any blast damage out of it. So, yeah, it's up to you. Personal preference there. But I think the value of the Railgun for punching through armor and just doing a lot of damage to shielded targets even simply cannot be overlooked, and I would much rather have this than the Siege Cannon. When we talk about forgiveness too, when you think about how many targets you're going to prime with your Firewall mortar, you can just kind of fire the Railgun into a horde of targets, and the game's pretty forgiving with the tracking on those things. You're going to hit something and detonate your target. It's not going to be too big of a deal. I will say, though, when you are looking at a group of targets that are primed and maybe a few of them are running shields and they haven't been primed, having the precision of the Railgun definitely is nice for picking out a target that you can actually detonate your combo on. So, a little bit of personal preference there, but you want something ranged for this particular build and play style. Let's go ahead and take a look at our components. To kick things off, we've got a massive damage boost to combo damage with the Colossus Combo Augment that increases combo damage by 50% of base damage. This was very much an important part of this build for me. As I made my way into GM1, I knew that combos were going to be much more necessary, and I was going to want to maximize my damage when detonating combos, so this was the way to go. Moving on, we've got Overclocked Regulator, which increases lightning and, more importantly, fire damage by 35%. We don't have any lightning abilities, but we've got Firewall Mortar. So if we've got Overclocked Regulator plus a full stack of Veteran's Fuhrer, we're looking at 135% damage increase to Firewall Mortar. Melting the enemies like cheese all day long. Moving on from that, we've got a Colossal Stock Augment. This increases maximum magazine size of all guns by 35%. Couple things I like about this. Number one, we're running a grenade launcher. Reloading grenade launchers absolutely sucks. So we can get 10 rounds out of our insult and injury, dump out all 10 of those rounds, and then switch back immediately to Elemental Rage and just start building up those stacks. Having a big fat mag in an assault rifle like Elemental Rage makes it that much easier to maintain stacks while swapping to abilities like Firewall Mortar before we actually have to reload. You could probably get at least 2 buildups of a stack of 20 with a Firewall Mortar fired in between or another ability fired in between before you actually have to reload the Elemental Rage, thanks to a magazine boost like this one. Next up, I'm running a Masterwork component called Synchronized Frame. This increases heavy assault launcher damage by 5%, which is kind of neither here nor there. The big thing about this, though, is that defeating an enemy increases your Railgun damage, in this case, by 60% for 5 seconds. So here's the nice trade-off we get with this build. While it is more focused on damage over time and, you know, combo damage with the Firewall Mortar and everything with the Elemental Rage, if you are in Grandmaster specifically, you are going to have a lot of targets with shields. They're not going to be primed by your Firewall Mortar. Something still needs to be done about them. Their shields still need to be torn down, and when we look at heavily armored targets like Scar Elites with shields, they're probably not going to die to your first combo. So having a really powerful way in which you can just finish them off with a Railgun, in this case, is exactly what this Synchronized Frame allows us to do. It's also great for just taking down the shields of Valkyries and just in general putting yourself in a position where you've got all of the necessary offensive abilities to do damage regardless of what the defense is bringing to the table. So really like this perk. Also just a lot of fun to see the massive damage numbers come off the Railgun when this thing is procced. For our last 2 slots, we are running survivability components. We've got a structural reinforcement to increase armor and shields, and we've got that heavy shield reinforcement that increases the damage of our shield while sprinting by 300% of base damage. Again, I tend to spend most of my time with this build sort of in the middle of the battlefield, not in the front line, not in the back, just dropping Firewall mortars and popping off railguns and engaging with my grenade launcher. But eventually, I'm going to get hit. I'm going to run low on HP. I'm going to run out of ammo. We're going to have to get in the thick of it. This makes that a little bit easier to do. We can pop up the shield, start to run over some trash mobs, pick up them health globes, pick up the green goodness. Maybe we even drop in and detonate with the melee and then just pop that shield so we've got that survivability and we can start to do that additional damage while keeping ourselves protected. So great way to finish out this loadout in my opinion. If we touch on the support gear, we're running Shield Pulse. I just think this is good to have in hard late game and in GM1. Anything that's going to help you and your team is useful. Battle Cry to me right now is kind of like a big whatever. If there's one area in which I'd love to see BioWare expand first and foremost when we talk about actually adding things to the game, it is the realm of support gear. There's only 2 support abilities for every single Javelin. I'd love to see a handful more added into the fray. I know they talked about bringing Masterwork and Legendary ones in a future update, so hopefully that brings with it more support abilities. I'd like to have more than 2 options to help my team, to support myself, and in general to be a better Colossus, to be a different Colossus. More concerned with variety and diversity than I am with just, you know, having 2 abilities that are like ultra effective. So we'll see where that goes. But that does it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my Heavy Metal Wizard Colossus loadout. Feel free to let me know if you decide to give this loadout a chance, if you like it, if you don't like it, if you modify it and turn it into something different. I'd love to hear what you come up with down in the comments section below. And if you have any suggestions for future Javelin loadouts you'd like to see, like if you want to see a Storm loadout or an Interceptor loadout or a Ranger loadout or another Colossus loadout, feel free to throw those suggestions down in the comment section below. I've been playing all of the Javelins at this point quite extensively, so I've definitely got some build ideas on the table as I'm making my way further into GM1 and pushing towards GM2. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching. And as always, try to be awesome to one another because you need the good people in your squad in life and in the game. Someone's got to prime the combo. Someone's got to detonate the combo. Someone's got to have you back.